Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Khalid Masood Kareem. I will show you the top 20 weekly volume leaders of the Karachi Stock Exchange. The Pak Cement closed at 17.31 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 17.63. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 19.40 and 16 respectively. Sideways movement is expected. The Pioneer Cement closed at 59.81 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 61.80. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 65.99 and 56.51 respectively. Sideways movement is expected. The PTCL closed at 9.04 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 9.26. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 10.05 and 8.53 respectively. Sideways movement is expected. The Dera Ghazi Khan Cement closed at 81.11 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 83.93. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 90.44 and 77.50 respectively. Sideways movement is expected. The Cherat Cement Company closed at 84.85 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 90.21. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 98.50 and 80.82 respectively. Technically, sideways movement is expected. The Oil and Gas Development Company closed at 112.91 on May 21, 2020. The close is above the weekly pivot level of 111.38. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 115.30 and 110.40 respectively. More upside is expected. The SUI Northern Gas Pipelines closed at 54.38 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 55.37. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 60.05 and 51 respectively. Sideways trend is expected. The Pakistan Petroleum closed at 93.99 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 94.94. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 113.92 and 75.95 respectively. Sideways trend is expected. The Bank of Punjab closed at 8.70 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 9.02. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 10.82 and 7.21 respectively. Negative movement is expected. The JSCL closed at 12.83 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 13.47. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 14.50 and 10.78 respectively. Expect a downside move. The Avancian closed at 36.23 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 36.31. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 39.95 and 32.80 respectively. The stock is trading within a downside sloping expanding pattern and has 2 upside and 2 downside tests. Major trend will emerge after a breakout above the upper trend line. The First Capital security closed at 1.24 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 1.28. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 1.54 and 1.03 respectively. The high wave candle announces the end of upside move and the stock may remain directionless in coming weeks. The Pak Electron closed at 22.65 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 23.38. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 26.40 and 20.85 respectively. The stock is trading sideways. The World Call Telecom closed at 0.91 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 0.95. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 1.13 and 0.76 respectively. The stock is trading within an expanding triangle and will remain sideways as long it remains within the pattern. The Hum network closed at 10.61 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 10.86. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 12.05 and 8.68 respectively. The stock may undergo a correction during current week. The Unity Foods closed at 12.28 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 12.67. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 13.13 and 11.98 respectively. The stock may undergo a correction. The K Electric closed at 3.10 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 3.12. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 3.43 and 2.82 respectively. The stock may challenge its overhead resistance. The Maple Leaf Cement closed at 25.51 on May 21, 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 26.43. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 28.79 and 24.32 respectively. The stock is trading sideways for the last 5 weeks. The indicators are showing loss of momentum. The TRG closed at 25.75 on May 21, 2020. The close is above the weekly pivot level of 25.51. The weekly resistance and support levels are at 27 and 24.32 respectively. The appearance of spinning candle suggests a halt in upside move. However, the indicators are directed to north. The Haskell closed at 14.48 level on 21 May 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 14.75 level. The weekly resistance and support are at 17.70 and 13.10 level respectively. The stock is trading sideways since last 7 weeks. It will remain choppy as long it trades within this rectangular pattern. The Karachi Stock Exchange 100 Index closed at 33,837 level on 21 May 2020. The close is below the weekly pivot level of 34,081 level. The range of movement since last 7 week is well contained within a rounded channel. It will remain choppy as long it trades within this channel. Hope you have enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe to my YouTube channel.